Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time you are tuning in. Welcome to Homesteading and Gardening in the Suburbs. I'm Emma from Homestead Gardening, and today I want to talk about how to start a self-reliant garden. Because I hear all the time that starting a garden is really expensive, and it really doesn't need to be. And when I first started my very first garden, it didn't really cost me anything. I had some seeds that I had gotten out of a gardening magazine back in the UK, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I'd asked my mum and dad, like, hey, I really want to grow a garden and some veggies. Can I do that? And the only place where I could do that, where they would let me grow it, was behind the back of the shed underneath the apple tree. So it was like the shadiest place in the garden. But I had some seeds of, I think it was like leafy greens or something like that. And I just grabbed the shovel that was in the shed and I just started making, space in the backyard. And I turned all the soil over. I sowed the seeds that I'd gotten, because I'd love reading the gardening magazines, because they were always full of like helpful info, not just from, growing fruit and vegetables, but they also had things for, taking care of flowers and perennials and lawn care and that kind of stuff. And that's how I used to earn my pocket money, was doing the gardening for mum and dad. And pocket money is your allowance here in the US. That's one of the things that I used to do. But the seed packets came for free in the magazine, and, I bought the magazine not every week, every couple of months or something like that, particularly if there was an interesting article or whatnot. And I really wish that I still had those magazines. I left them all in the UK. When I relocated. Occasionally I will be, on the phone with my mum and dad, and I'm like, hey, I'm sure I saw in one of these magazines that there was an article about this. Do you still have that? And, my dad will go through, and because he took a bunch of cuttings out of the magazines before getting rid of them. So some of them he has, some of them not so much. But really that was all that I got to get started, was a packet of seeds that came free in a magazine and, a shovel that I'd borrowed from my parents. And, if you need tools to get started with your garden, ask friends, ask family. You could even ask a neighbor if you're friendly with your neighbors. There are like websites and things where you can, borrow tools. Oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of it. Neighborly, something like that. So there are options for you. The other thing, of course, is to see if there's something going super cheap at a yard sale or on the local classifieds. Even the thrift store. I can't tell you how many times I've been to the thrift store and I've seen gardening tools, and my husband's having to drag me away from the gardening tools because I don't need any more. But I'm a real sucker for like antique gardening tools. The garden hoe that I had was my great grandfather's. It was like, this sucker was old and it worked incredibly well still. It was very well cared for. It did the job. So I'm a little bit of a sucker for old gardening tools, so I always end up looking at them, which now I'm going to be in really dangerous territory moving to New England, because like wherever I look, there seems to be like an antique store or like a picker's yard thing. So yeah, I might be getting myself some antique tools. But, you don't need to really own a lot of this stuff to get started. And, if you start your garden, properly, and, you start off on the right foot, you don't need to be doing a lot of digging and all of that good stuff moving forwards. Certainly if you've got a raised bed, you don't really need, garden tools at all. The other thing, of course, is, when you've got a self-reliant garden, you don't really need to be buying fertilizer, pesticides, or other common gardening inputs. And even if you're getting started in building your garden beds and, looking to improve your soil, there's always ways that you can get things for very cheap or free. I have a friend who gets manure from a farm not too far from her, where the lady who owns the horses doesn't give them hay or straw that's been treated with pesticides, so she's able to get that for free. I know in the UK, people would leave like bags of manure in like the old horse feed bags, and it was just left on the side of the road with a little sign that says for free. Here in the US, I've definitely seen, where you can get it for free, asking a stable. And sometimes, they'll give it to you for free if you muck out. So if you don't mind mucking out a stable or two to load up, a truck or some bags in your car, then that's another way to do it as well. Other, free materials that often come around are definitely something that's seasonal, and that's fall leaves. And if you're looking at building your garden beds, or you're wanting some mulch, or some, brown material to add into your compost bin, well, fall is technically here. We are past the 22nd of September, which is the fall equinox, so we're definitely in fall now. But that's a really easy to get hold of free material, and people want them. They don't want them on their lawns. They don't. They're paying for them to be collected by the trash, and that always made me sad because I use fall leaves all the time in my garden. Like, they're an amazing addition to the compost. They're also really great for helping enrich the soil. And the test garden bed that I had, that was all that I would add to it, was compost and leaves. So in fall, we would just rake all the leaves over to the test bed, leave them there, and it has taken the soil that we're on, which is incredibly sandy, like it's more sand than anything, where I am currently living. And it has changed it to this beautiful loamy soil that grows incredibly well. So leaves, dead easy to get hold of. Cardboard too, like if you're starting a garden bed from scratch and you want to do the lasagna garden, where you're just kind of sheet layering things. So you want a nice layer to block out the weeds on grass. Cardboard, you can often find that for free as well. So, starting a self-reliant garden, there's things that you can do to, really save money. And actually, a self-reliant garden can even break you away from needing to buy seeds every year. And that's where a lot of the cost would come in for, somebody that was starting a garden, is the seeds and the plants, right? If you're buying starts from a big box store, you're going to be paying a lot more than you are for a packet of seeds. And seed prices have risen. Like, there's no denying that. I've talked about that before on the podcast. Like, I remember paying, $1.99 for a packet of organic, like certified organic seeds. And now they're like $2.99 or $3.99 or $3.50. I've even paid $4.50, $5.50 for a packet of seeds, depending on where you go. So it pays to kind of shop around and have a look for seeds. But if you're looking for something that's kind of rare, then you're going to be expecting to pay for it. But there's ways that you can start off very low cost or no cost at all, and that's by getting into some seed saving groups, homesteading groups, gardening groups, and, just talking to people and asking if they have something that is available. Certainly in seed saving groups, people are always looking for people to help grow out seeds, and that's where they'll send you some seeds. You can grow them. You have to save seeds from the plants, so definitely look into how to save seeds from certain types of plants if you're interested in doing this. But more often than not, they'll allow you to keep some of those seeds or some of the produce, and then you would send the remainder of those seeds back. Different growers have different stipulations, so some people, they want to keep that variety pure. keep that varietal purity, so keep things true to type. So you would only really want to be growing that one variety unless you've got the know-how to prevent cross-pollination and things. So that's a good way to get started. Another good way is just to kind of browse through the exchange on Seed Savers Exchange. I've had a number of people where I've requested seeds and asked like how they want to be paid, and they've told me that there isn't any payment necessary, and they've just sent them directly to me with a note that said, pay it forward when you can. So part of the things I've been doing over the last year is working to save seed and start to develop a strategy for being able to save seed enough that I could then share through the Seed Savers Exchange. So there's a whole heap of different gardeners, different growers who are all growing seeds and then sharing them within the wider gardening community. So it's always worth to kind of check out what's available through there, because you might get somebody who is willing to share them to you for free. So you don't necessarily need a lot to get started. Again, asking in Facebook groups and stuff like that, that's a good way. But just make sure that you are abiding by those group rules, because, they often get a lot of people that will be asking for things for free. So check the rules before you post. Another great way that you can look into it is seed libraries. And I want to say this is a movement that started in Canada, maybe. I believe it was by a teacher. But the premise is that, just like you go to your normal library to check out books and things for free, they have seeds that you can do the same thing. So you're able to, check out a small portion of seeds to, then grow in your garden. And, if you're able to save seeds and replenish them later in the season, then, that's often very much encouraged. So definitely take a look at those. You can just do a little search on the internet and see if there is one near you. All right, so what is being self-sufficient to you in your garden, right? What is that question for you? How would you answer it? Is it not needing to buy anything from outside of your homestead? Is it being able to keep the circle of the seasons? So grow from seed to garden, garden to table, and garden to seed. And this particular podcast is really about a self-sufficient garden that's going to grow seed to seed, because a garden that is going to produce food no matter how the season and climate will change without all the external inputs, that is true kind of self-sufficiency and self-reliance at its best. And if you're brand new to growing a garden, right, you're going to need to decide the location where your garden will grow. You want your garden site to be based on where the plants are going to get the most amount of sunlight a day. So that's usually somewhere that is going to be facing south. Plants need at least 8 hours of sun. The more sun, the better for most plants. And there's a couple of different posts that I've written on the blog about how to get started with your garden, and I can link those up in the description. But really, the best self-sufficient gardens grow seed to seed. And when you're starting a garden, you need to have seeds and plants to grow in it, right? We just talked a little bit about those. But you can grow lots of different types of seeds, right? You can grow heirlooms, you can grow open pollinated, you can grow hybrid, you can grow organic, and you can grow open source seeds. But there's a couple of different approaches that you can choose for your garden. And are you somebody who wants reliability from the very beginning, or are you somebody that loves to experiment and explore? Right? Because there's a couple of different types of gardeners when it comes to growing your own food. So which type are you? So let's start with the first one, which is I'm dependable and reliable. I feel like I'm in a job interview. Like, what are your greatest skills? I'm dependable and reliable. You know that you're a dependable and reliable homestead gardener because you want tried and true varieties, right? You want plants that you know will consistently grow and yield in your garden. Those that you know how they grow and what your likely harvests are going to look like, right? You want to reduce the risk in your garden, right? You tend to stick with varieties of plants that you know well, right? Varieties that you've heard of. Maybe it's things like Amish paste tomatoes, which are very popular, right? You do your homework, and if you see something interesting in, the gardening magazine or, in the catalogue, right? If you see something interesting, you're going to see if others in your region have had success growing it. You're going to do a bit of homework and find out, is this going to be, working for you where you live? Is it worth spending the money on? Now, on the other hand of the gardening spectrum, you've got, I'm the experimental explorer, right? And you know that you're the experimenting and the exploring homestead gardener because you love to try something new in your garden, right? You're in love browsing through the seed catalogues or exchanging seeds with people because a variety looked super interesting, or maybe just straight up the name was really awesome and you were like, I need to grow this because that's a really cool name, or I need to grow this because that looks really crazy. You don't mind if things don't work in your garden. It was fun just to try it and see. And if it didn't grow, you swap the seeds for something new to try, right? It doesn't matter if it didn't grow for you. Now, when you're choosing what seeds to grow in your self-reliant garden, it somewhat depends on which homestead gardener type you are, right? Because the basic idea for your self-sufficient garden is to grow plants and save seeds from those that are growing well. And then you want to grow the plants that are thriving in your garden because this is then adapting and then going to help your garden excel each year. And the ability to grow in your garden and the climate you have is passed on to those seeds, right? If you've heard me talk about kind of landrace seeds getting started, this is kind of like how like we as a homestead have evolved into this. Now, to have a self-sufficient garden, you have to save your seeds, right? If you're growing a garden that's seed to seed and you truly want to be self-sufficient, then you absolutely need to be saving your seeds. And the best gardens are going to grow with seeds that are local because they're adapted to the growing conditions in the area. And you also want and need the seeds to freely pollinate to increase that genetic diversity. And this is what brings in resilience and the ability for your garden to keep thriving no matter the weather, the pests, or the diseases that are happening in there. So you save the seeds from those plants that you enjoyed eating and those that grew well, right? That you want those two in combination, right? It grew really well, you ate the fruit or you ate whatever it was that was growing, you liked it, save the seeds from it. The following year you replant the seeds that you saved. You taste the plants, you save the seeds from those that you love to eat the most. The next year you replant those seeds. And you continue that process of saving seeds, tasting the plants, replanting it, right? This is how you create a landrace variety. And this is how gardening's been done for not just decades, but hundreds of years, thousands of years. This is how plants became domesticated from the wild and have now become the varieties that we love to eat and grow. So let's break this down for each homestead gardener type. So let's start with the explorer, right? What the explorer gardener would do is plant a few different varieties of the same plant close together. Let's say you're planting 3 to 6 varieties, right? You want to plant them so that they all have enough room to grow, but you don't want to worry about trying to stop them from cross-pollinating, right? So let's say that you've got, some lettuce, right? You're having a look at the seed packet. You can grow them, 6 to 8 inches apart. You probably want to maybe plant them 6 inches apart, right? So you're going to put all those seeds out, let them grow together, and then you're going to taste them. Let's say that they all tasted great and you're like, these are fantastic. So you're taking a few leaves off each one, right? And then you're just going to let them grow and grow and grow until they eventually go to seed. And you're just going to let them all come up to seed, and you're going to save the seeds together. And then the next year that you're going to plant those seeds, that you've saved rather than those from the seed packet. right? You don't need to worry about the cross-pollinating, right? If you're an explorer gardener, then, you can plant heirloom varieties, you can plant open-pollinated, even F1 hybrid varieties if you really want to, right? There's a lot of opportunity for you to kind of plant things, right? Especially if you're not worried about things cross-pollinating. This is only going to be for you and your garden, right? You're not going to be trying to sell the seed or anything later on. Because if you are, then I would skip putting in the F1 hybrid varieties, okay? Because some of the F1 hybrids that that are there, they are plant variety protected. They have a PVP on them, so which restricts how you can save the seed. They may also have other types of patents on them, so you might want to give those a skip. If you're interested in patents, then you want to be listening to the podcast episode about patents and plants that I did with the Open Source Seed Initiative. So definitely check that out. All right. So if you're the explorer, you've got your 3 to 6 varieties, right? You've planted them out. You want to let them all grow together. You want to let the bees, the bugs, and the wind do their thing and move the pollen around these plants, right? You want to try the fruits and veggies that you're growing, right? If you loved it, save the seeds to grow next year. If you didn't like it, don't bother saving the seeds. Easy peasy, right? The next year, grow the seeds that you saved. Plant them out in the garden. Allow that pollen to move naturally between the plants, right? If you've got squashes growing, you want to let the bees and the other bugs kind of move that pollen between the plants, right? Try the fruits and veggies again. Save the seeds from those that grew really well and those that you love the taste, right? Continue the growing out and seed saving. And if you want to try adding new varieties of plants as you are growing and saving seeds, then do it. This is your garden and you can grow it how you want to. But by doing this process of saving seeds each year from your garden, you are starting to develop a landrace. And I know that I keep talking about developing landraces, but I think there's so much power in having plants and varieties that are consistently going to be producing for you on your homestead. And if you're looking at having self-reliance and self-sufficiency, but you are not doing this, then you are not growing a self-sufficient or self-reliant garden and homestead, right? You are missing a huge piece here. And this is such a big piece that, is easily going to be, having a bigger return on your investment, right? Like, plants are incredibly prolific. They want to, make seeds and have more and more plants, right? Have you ever opened up a pumpkin, right? We're coming up to Halloween pretty soon. As I'm recording this, it's the end of September. But, if you've ever scooped out a pumpkin, like, look at how many seeds that are in there. If you've eaten an apple and seen the seeds that are in there, right? Plants want to propagate, right? And saving your own seeds, you are very, very quickly going to end up with so many seeds that you don't know what to do with it all. So why would you be spending, $3.50 a packet of seeds, $4 a packet of seeds, right? I mean, maybe if you're lucky, you can find some for $1.99 or $1, right? But most seed packets seem to be around $2.99 to $4.50 is what I've seen here in the US. So why wouldn't you be growing your own and saving seeds and creating something that is going to be growing well? So let's talk about this if you are the reliable gardener, right? If you're the reliable gardener, do some research on the varieties that are going to perform well in your area, right? Maybe you call up the extension, the university extension where you are. Like, they often have a gardening section, or they have master gardeners that you can talk to about different varieties that grow well. Like, with me moving to New England, I can tell you I have done an internet search on varieties that grow well in Maine, because that's where we're moving to, and I want to see what varieties are going to be growing well. I've also looked up what the typical season is, what the gardening zone is, right? I'm going from a zone 7A to a zone 4B, right? I've got a much shorter growing season. So because of that, I'm starting to look at what is it that that I currently have, what varieties are going to be able to mature within that time frame. So if you're kind of the reliable gardener, then definitely do some research on those varieties that perform well. If you have been gardening, you will want to be growing those varieties that perform well that you found through your research with ones that you already grow and love in your garden. You want to allow that pollen to move naturally between plants, because this is how that landrace is started. This is how you start to have in that robustness and the reliance and the ability for your plants to cope with the changes in climate or whatever else is being thrown at your garden, right? If you are really worried and you want to keep your heirloom varieties and you want to keep them, true to the type, then grow your project. No, grow your project. Oh my gosh, I definitely need more coffee this morning. You want to grow your seed-saving and self-sufficient project, or your landrace project, in a separate part of the garden, or use tools to prevent cross-pollination, so things like cages with floating row cover on them. And you want to make sure that you've got a couple of your favourite heirlooms in with your varieties that you are developing for your landrace though. So let's say let's go to squashes, because they're really easy to do, and they like to really cross-pollinate, right? So there's multiple different varieties of squash, right? You've got your cucurbita peppos, which are things like your acorn squash, your zucchinis, patty pans, those kind of plants, and your spaghetti squash. You have your cucurbita maxima, which are things like some of your pumpkins. You can get some of the big field pumpkins. They are part of the cucurbita peppos, but some other pumpkins are part of the cucurbita maxima. So you'll need to kind of have a look on the seed packet to see which variety it is. But they tend to be things like your Marina di Chioggia. My Italian's not great, and I've probably butchered the pronunciation of that. But it's called like the warty sea pumpkin. It's delicious, by the way. Also, things like your buttercup squashes are part of the Maxima family. And then you have your cucurbita moschatas, which are things like your Long Island cheese pumpkin, butternut squashes, Seminole pumpkins, right? They're all part of the moschata family. So those three different families of pumpkin and squashes, so the peppos, the maximas, and the moschatas, they don't cross-pollinate with each other, or it's very, very rare that they would cross-pollinate between them, but they readily cross-pollinate between members of the same family. So for your peppos, if you have got a field pumpkin that is part of the peppo family, it will cross with your patty pan squashes or your zucchinis that are growing nearby, but it's not going to cross with the butternut squash, let's say, that you're growing. So let's take the peppos, right, as an example. So let's say that you have a dark star zucchini, which you absolutely adore. You've got a Romanesco zucchini that you also really, really like. And then let's say that you were doing some research and you found that, Black Beauty, and there's, a yellow variety that you really, really wanted to try, but they grew really well in your area. So you would grow your dark star, your patty pans, your Romanesco, and the yellow one. You would grow them together or very close to each other in your garden, because you're still growing varieties that you know and love, right? Your Dark Star and the Romanesco, right? Those are the ones that you really like. Now you're adding in a couple more which are kind of unknown, so you can add those into your project and allow the bees to kind of pollinate between them, right? And you're gonna eat them. Let's say that you thought, oh, these are all really good, right? You'll then want to let a couple go big enough so that they become seed. And if you wanted to keep some that were going to be just, you want to keep that variety. So let's say you want to do the Dark Star zucchini, right? And you want to keep those as being Dark Star zucchinis. So you're going to grow one within your Landrace project, but then you're also going to grow another couple of plants in a different area where you can make sure that they're not cross-pollinating with anything else, and you can save the seeds from there. So that's a good way that you can have, a backup for your seeds, right? If you find that when you go to plant out those seeds again, they're not quite what you're expecting, you don't really like them, you can go back to the original varieties. So if you're more of a reliable gardener, you are still going to follow this, trying the taste of the fruits and vegetables and saving those seeds from those that you really liked and grew well. You're still going to follow that process, right? You're going to grow out the saved seed from the landrace that you did and try and grow as many plants as you can, right? Grow your heirlooms still in another part of the garden, or you can grow your landrace project in a testbed area. So you're still going to allow that pollination to happen naturally, but without kind of dedicating like a massive space in your garden. And that's exactly what we did here on our homestead. Was I had a testbed area. That's exactly what I called it. It was the testbed. And it was over by the greenhouse and the shed. And that's where I would put varieties that I had never grown before, that I wanted to see how they were going to perform before adding them out into the main garden, right? And it was good because plants that didn't make it in the test bed, I didn't even bother growing them out in the main bed. So it was a good way for me to kind of see what's going to grow to how I garden without kind of dedicating a lot of space to it in the main garden. So it was a really good way to kind of, weed out, those underperformers. So I'm only sort of moving things that are growing well into the main garden to become part of the bigger landrace project. So when it comes to adding varieties to your self-sufficient garden, really, as you continue to grow out and save seeds from your landrace, you're going to, there's going to be a point where you want to add new varieties from time to time. And there's a myriad of different reasons why you would want to add new varieties. Sometimes it's good just to get a flush of new genetics in there, because then you start to see things like, vigor coming back within your landrace, also known as inbreeding depression is often seen, especially if you're only saving seed from a small number of plants. Adding in different varieties helps to, refresh the genetics a little bit, right? It's like running, some of that, washing machine dye stuff, if you've ever had dark colored pants and stuff that have faded, and then you add in some of that refresh stuff to your washing machine when you're washing your clothing, and then it's it takes away that kind of weird grey color, right, and gives it a refresh. Same kind of thing, right? Adding in your new variety from time to time is going to give your seeds a bit of a refresh, right? It's going to help them stay healthy. It's going to help keep that diversity in there. And remember, it's that diversity of the genetics which is the key for your success with this kind of landrace garden. It's that genetic diversity that's got that memory in there of how to cope with different stresses in the environment. So you can add the plants of different varieties to your normal garden if you're okay with the cross-pollination and you don't mind selecting the plants for traits later. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But a more cautious approach that really saves you time in the long run would be to try that variety first in a test garden or test bed area, just like I explained that I did. That way you can see if the variety will grow well first, and then you're only going to be putting the best of the best into your landrace and self-sufficient garden project, right? Because if your plant, your trial plant variety grows really well, you save those seeds, you're going to plant them out in the main garden with the landrace variety that you've already been developing the next season. You're going to allow that natural movement of pollen again, select the seeds based on those traits that you're looking for, like flavor, how well the plant grew, shape, texture, whatever it is. And, you're going to choose those traits to grow for the plants to then pass off to their offspring, right? If you are wanting just to kind of put those, random seeds in each time, directly into the landrace, that's totally fine too. But when it comes to growing out those seeds from the next season, you're going to need to kind of hone in a bit more. So you're going to see a lot more different traits and things that are going to pop up, and you're going to need to do a lot more selecting. So let's say that, let's say that it's melons that are growing and you added one in, variety that you really liked. But let's say that the offspring that came about had a weird bitterness to the melon when you tried them. You are going to have to then, the subsequent years, you're going to have to kind of root out those varieties that tasted kind of bitter by not saving seed from those, and then kind of working on only saving seed from varieties that didn't taste bitter, they tasted really sweet, planting those out, and then again, checking that next season, that one was bitter, okay, let's not save seed from that one. These ones were all good, save seeds from those, grow those ones out again. So it's going to take a little bit longer to do that. And that's why I recommend doing it in a trial bed first, because you can get a feel for how it's growing too. So you can grow it the same way that you would in the main garden, right? And you're not losing a year because you're going to be able to save the seeds from that year that you've grown it, because it's already kind of adapted to how you are growing your garden at that point, and then you're going to introduce it into your landrace variety. So again, I recommend the test garden approach if you've got space, because it helps you to keep that curiosity of growing new varieties without having all the extra work later of trying to remove those unwanted traits. And I know that it seems almost too easy, right? When it comes to having a self-sufficient garden. Grow the seeds, taste it, if you liked it and it grows well, save the seed. And this really is self-reliant gardening, right? You can move well away, not only from the grocery store for your vegetables, but needing to purchase seeds all the time too. Remember that this is how plants have been domesticated into the fruits and vegetables that we have today. And generations of homesteaders, gardeners and farmers did this. You don't need a STEM degree, that's a science, technology, engineering and math degree from an Ivy League school to do this. You don't need that. None of these homesteaders, gardeners and farmers, had a background in, biology, genetics or anything like that. They just saved seeds from plants that they knew that they liked the taste of and that grew incredibly well. So, there's lots of opportunities there, and don't be afraid of seed saving. If you're trying to, keep an heirloom variety just like an heirloom, then yes, that comes with additional complexity to be able to maintain. But if you're looking at growing a landrace, then that helps things become a lot easier, because it doesn't matter if it's cross-pollinated, because that's what you're looking for. You're wanting that cross-pollination because that's diversity that's coming into the genetics. So let's talk about some tips for success. So you might recall that growing seed from an F1 hybrid means that you're going to get plants that look different from the plant that you save the seeds from. And this is normal. It's the diversity in the genetics showing up. It's not genetic modification. It's not GMO, or at least the legal definition of GMO. GMO is where you are changing the genetics of the plant on, a cellular level. This isn't what you're doing. This is traditional plant breeding. Okay, so don't worry that you're making GMOs or anything like that. But when you grow out an F1 hybrid, you're going to see lots of different variations that happen, right? So if you're growing seeds from a plant that you grew at the grocery store, you're going to see some weird and wonderful things. Like, you're not going to see like a melon with ears on it or anything like that, or a melon that's like half a melon, half something else. That's not what I mean. Like, you might see like different shapes of melon, or you might see plants that are more bushy, plants that are growing a long way, right? You're going to see differences in plants like that. But if you're worried about those kind of things, then, start your landrace and self-sufficient gardening projects using heirlooms and open pollinated seeds instead. Don't even bother with the F1 hybrids, and you really don't need to. My next tip is to start your self-sufficient garden slowly. Develop 1 or 2 land races at a time so that you can learn the skills of seed saving, storage and selection, and start with easy seed saving plants first, right? Broad beans, aka fava beans, okra, runner beans. There's a lot of beans, actually. Beans are really easy to save seed from. Corn, cucumber, melons, squash, eggplant, peppers. They're all easy to save seed from and are easy to start converting to landrace seeds. So start with some of those easy plants and then work your way up to things that are a little bit more difficult. Don't worry if varieties cross-pollinate and you get some unusual colours, shapes or sizes, okay? These things happen. Maybe it's something that you want to keep going. Maybe it isn't. I really want to grow a grey-blue coloured banana squash. I think that would be really cool. It'll be pretty gnarly looking. I just want to do it for the novelty value, not for any particular reason. So sometimes when weird things happen, right, it's kind of cool for other people. So it might be something that kind of grows naturally and you're like, that looks really awesome, I want to keep growing that. Something weird's happened in my garden with beans. So I had a random volunteer bean that's grown up. It grew where I hadn't planted any beans. So it either come through the compost or it was something that had fallen and had kind of happened naturally in the garden. But it's a pole bean. And it is a green bean, very delicious as green beans, I must say. But as they get older, they start turning from green to purple. And inside there's, there's black beans, which are really good as drying beans. So I've got this kind of really weird, plant that is, from a visual perspective, it's really easy because I know as a gardener, like, oh, those beans are going purple. They're going to be ready for drying beans really soon. And oh no, they're, the green beans are all there, like they're good as fresh eating. But the pods grow pretty long. So this is a variety that I saw totally by accident in the garden one day. I was like, oh, I didn't grow green beans here. That's kind of weird. And I harvested a couple, gave some to my friend, so she could enjoy some. She was like, these are really good. And I was like, yeah, they are pretty good. And then I went back and noticed that they had purple pods on them. I was like, that's weird. They were green. And then, let them dry. And now I've got these really interesting drying beans. So I've got this variety that's just popped up all on its own through a random cross-pollination that's happened. And now I'm saving seeds from it because it's got some really great traits that I want to continue. So, sometimes something weird happens, but it works out for the best. Incidentally, if you're part of the Facebook group, I've got some pictures of that variety that is on there and running a bit of a challenge for you guys to come up with a name for this variety that's just randomly appeared. So I'd love to see what your suggestions are. So if you're not part of the Facebook group, get in there. And if you're in the Facebook group, then let me know. Come up with a name for this variety. And my last tip is try not to be hard on yourself if some plants don't taste good or even if some plants fail. Remember that when it comes to having a self-sufficient and self-reliant garden, it's really survival of the fittest and most tasty. If it doesn't taste good, don't save the seeds. And if it doesn't work in your garden, that's just fine. Like, you don't want plants that you're going to have to pamper and hover over like every 3 minutes to, get it to grow, right? You want something that's going to be able to grow on its own, because then that gives you the opportunity to do the other stuff that needs to be done on the homestead, right? And of course, the other side of having a more self-sufficient garden is using what you already have on the homestead, right? So, using grass clippings in your compost, making your own compost, using leaves from the fall trees in your compost, right? Generating your own compost from scraps out of the kitchen and then using that to then feed your garden again. Using things like green manures or cover crops to help feed your soil. And I go into a lot of this as part of the mini training for an intensive garden. So check that out. There are definitely a whole heap of information on my website that you can check out there, and I also did it as a podcast, so you can check those out too wherever you are tuning into this one. I hope you found this episode helpful. If you did, please let me know, and I always love to hear from you guys, especially those of you that are in the Facebook group. So if you're not part of the Facebook community, definitely check out the link in the description of this podcast. Make sure you fill out all of the questions though. If you don't fill them all out, then my team doesn't know to let you in. They think it's spam. So please make sure you fill out all the questions, and let me know how your garden's growing and what your suggestions are for this weird bean variety that I have in the garden. Until next week, I hope your garden grows beautifully, and I will see you all next week.